to show you guys some tricks on how to come up with some more interesting guitar parts / chord progressions, kind of in that neo-soul type style. And we'll use what I just played in the beginning as an example here. So at the point where I'm at now in my playing, coming up with stuff like this is sort of like an all-in-one type process, meaning the melody and the chords kind of come together as one thing at one time. But if you're not quite there yet, one of the best ways to approach this is to pick a chord progression first. So in this first example, the chord progression is C minor 7 to D minor 7 to G minor 7. So we just want to determine the overall key center here. We're in the key of G minor. This is like the 4 minor chord. This is the 5 minor chord. And here's our 1 home bass minor chord. So all that extra flavor, those embellishments, and those scale notes are likely going to come from a G natural minor scale, because that's like my home bass. So let's determine a feel for this progression. So I'm thinking like... Right, so that's just playing straight up chords in time, nice slow tempo here. Now what I highly encourage you guys to do is to stop thinking of chords as just a stagnant thing. Like, you don't have to play every note of the chord at one time in the same way all the time. What a chord is, at the heart of it, is a collection of notes, right? And those notes to us suggest a certain sound. And we group those notes together and then label that sound. Like C minor 7 is really a collection of 4 notes. You have C, E flat, G, and B flat, right? But I can play those 4 notes in so many different ways up and down the neck. First of all, I don't have to play them all at once. Second of all, I could play them in different orders, in different octaves, in different places on the guitar. So what gives you the freedom to really embellish this chord up and down the neck is to know where those key notes are everywhere. Personally, I don't think much in note names. I think more in intervals. So I'm thinking like root, flat 3, 5, and flat 7. If you're new to intervals or numbers, that just comes from the scale. So root is 1, the first note of the scale. Flat 3, that's the 3rd note in a minor scale. The 5th is the 5th note in a minor scale, and the flat 7 is the 7th note in a minor scale. So the more places I can see those notes up and down the neck, the better. And what really helps with this is knowing your chord inversions. So I have another video about drop 2 7th chord inversions. Check that out. That will really help with this style of playing. To give you a quick idea of what those chord inversions look like and how that opens up the neck for you, C minor 7 will look like this. Or so you have all those places up and down the neck where you can play all 4 C minor 7 chord tones in a way that feels comfortable on guitar. So what's going on over the C minor 7 part here? What I'm doing is I'm starting with a basic C minor 7 voicing down here. And you'll notice with a chord, the highest note rings out as the melody note to our ears. If I were to sing the melody to this chord, dun, right? I could also play that chord. Dun. Now that sounds like the melody, right? So you have control over the melody of the chord progression. Chord progressions actually have melodies. So all I'm doing here is playing up to the B string. So that gives me this melody note on top. And then I can continue that melody and do kind of whatever I want. And here I'm using other notes from a G natural minor scale, which is our overarching key center here. But the notes that I'm choosing are more centered around C minor, because that's the chord I'm on. So that to me looks kind of like a C minor pentatonic. So once I do that, I'm coming up here where I have a drop 2 C minor 7 inversion. Basically, that's my root, my 5th, my flat 3, and my flat 7. Same 4 notes as down here. Root, 5, flat 7, flat 3. Just in a different order and in a different octave, right? But I want to hear a different melody note. I want to hear this melody note. And in relation to C minor, that's my 9 or my 2. So I know that sounds really good over that chord. A 9 over a minor chord tends to sound pretty good. So all I'm doing is I'm replacing the root note, the C, with a D or a 9 or 2. And I like to hammer that on. That gives you kind of that neo-soul type sound. So right after that, I'm going to D minor 7, which is my next chord. And you'll notice I'm not waiting for beat 1 to hit that D minor 7, which just makes it a little more interesting. It's actually landing on beat 4 of the first measure. 1, 2, 3, Now here, I can just hold out D minor, or I can embellish this chord a little bit. So right now my pinky is free, and I can use that finger to hammer on and pull off and add different notes, right? And the notes that typically sound good are those within the scale, right? Overarching scale being G natural minor again, right? So I'm choosing this embellishment here, where I'm using my pinky on the B string to add a fourth into this chord and pulling back down to the flat 3. So we're going... And then I'm kind of arpeggiating just the next two notes going up this way or going down in pitch. So I'm making sure to hit that chord with this note on top because I want that to be my melody so that I hear that as my melody. And then coming down the G string, then the D string, just holding out the chord like that. So let's look at this next part. Instead of just staying on G minor here, and then going back to C minor like that, what I'm doing is this. So there's a lot of different stuff going on here. First of all, I'm thinking of that first melody I started with, and I'm just doing a similar idea over the G minor. It's actually the same intervals related to the chord. So here, I was starting on a minor third and going minor third, 4, 5, and flat 7. Here over the G minor, I'm starting on a minor third of G minor and doing those same intervals, minor third, 4, 5, flat 7. If that's too much to think about, you can still achieve this just by thinking like, what's the general idea of that melody? Well, we're going 4/16 notes, right? Da 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 da, and we're going from low to high. What I'm also doing here is harmonizing the first two notes, so I'm going, which is just fourths. It's using other notes from the scale below my melody note to harmonize that. I could, if I wanted to, do that as well, to harmonize all those notes. But here I'm just hitting the root and then these two notes at the same time. So it's actually outlining that G minor 7, right? Because here's a root, a flat 7, and a flat 3. So what's this here? Well, let's look at this chord first. This is like a B flat major 7. I have a root, a 7, and a third here that I'm playing. Now, why does that work within the same measure as the G minor? Well, that's your relative major. B flat and G minor are the same key center. So like a G natural minor scale is the same thing as a B flat major scale. So you call that relationship relative major and minor, okay? And those two chords are very similar in tonality, so oftentimes you have the option to substitute one for the other. Now what's this here? This right here is a diminished triad. This gets a little bit complicated, but it's essentially a way to build tension to get up to this B flat major, right? Tension, resolution. I like to think of diminished chords as dominant 7, flat 9 chords. I have a whole different video on diminished chords on my channel, so check that out to go into depth there. But essentially, in my mind, this chord here is kind of suggesting like an F7 flat 9. And the reason is that's the 5 chord of where we're going. We're going to B flat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from B flat is F. The 5 chord is often used to build tension to resolve somewhere. So for me, that's easier to think about once you understand the theory. Obviously, at first, if this is new to you, that's going to be very confusing. But for now, just think this is a way to build tension to get to this chord. Okay. The other thing I'm doing is I'm hammering on these two notes here. So there is a lot going on, but the overarching idea here is that we're following a melody and just filling in as much of the chord as we can underneath it. We're just giving this whole thing a lot more movement rather than thinking of the chords as just stagnant things. So when I get here, this is a similar concept as that diminished chord or dominant 7 flat 9 chord that we were just talking about. Instead of going to B flat now, we're going to C minor. So I'm thinking this is really being used as like a G7 flat 9 to get back to C minor. Now why is that? Well, G7 is the 5 chord of C minor, which is where we're going. And we just talked about how the 5 chord can build a lot of tension to then resolve on wherever you're trying to go. And if we look at this diminished chord, the notes in this diminished chord represent a G7 flat 9. If you want a little trick to this, a lot of people use this trick at the beginning because the theory can be a lot at the beginning, where we just look at where we're going, we go a half step down, and we play a diminished chord from there. to then lead a half step up to our root of the chord that we want to go to. So you can think of it that way if you want, and also these diminished chords can move in minor thirds, meaning I can go from here, up a minor third, the entire shape, again, and then inevitably land on C minor where I'm going. So that's the first half, and you'll see how there's a lot going on here, right? We're using embellishments, we're using other notes from the scale, we're harmonizing melody notes, we're doing substitutions, we have some dominant 7 chords in here, some diminished chords. So there's a lot going on, a lot you can do with just a simple chord progression. What I would do is just pick a concept that you like and start with the chord progression and just try to add that one concept into your chord progression to start. Once that feels comfortable, then you can try it with another concept. Then you can start to put them together. But don't try to throw this all in there at once if this is all new to you. So the second half is pretty much the same thing. The only difference is I'm jumping up a little higher to a different C minor voicing. The first one I was doing was here, right? Like with this C minor 7, just with a 9 on top. This next one, I'm jumping up to the next C minor 7 drop 2 inversion, which looks like this. Same 4 notes as this, same 4 notes as this. Just a different order. And actually this one is the same thing as this. Exact same order of notes, just up an octave, right? Root, 5th, flat 7, flat 3. But what I'm doing is to get a different melody note here. Instead of hitting this melody note, this flat 3, coming up to the F here, which is just another note that I wanted to hear in this melody, right? So we got same thing here. We're just gonna go. And then this time, we're just hitting a G minor 7 and kind of hitting the chord here, but with that rhythm. So this, instead of like a straight up G minor 7 like this, I just have a different tension note which gives this chord a different melody, right? Because we talked about the top note of that chord sounds like a melody note. So right here, kind of bring out that melody note. What is that in relation to G minor? That's your 4 or 11, so you could call this a G minor 11 chord. It's a nice chord. You'll notice too that with a lot of this, I'm doing a little bit of hybrid picking. So I'm picking the bass note down here, and I'm using these 3 fingers, the middle through the pinky, to kind of pluck, right, the last 3 strings here. That way I can kind of separate the two if I want to. And then I'm ending with a little just flat 7 to root. So if we put it all together, we get this. The main overarching idea here is that we're starting with a chord progression and we're thinking more in terms of melody than just having to play all those chords the same way throughout the chord progression. We're letting the melody guide us to different places on the neck where we can fill in below the melody with other chord tones of that chord that we're on, or other voicings of that chord. Then you have all that other stuff where you can implement substitutions, passing chords, diminished chords, 5/7 chords, and so on. If you really want to dive deep and learn how to open up all these pathways up and down the neck, I'm linking a free training below in the description. Check it out. You can also apply to get on a call with me to see if we might be a good fit to work together in the capacity of a mentorship. In any case, if you enjoyed the video, leave a comment below, subscribe, hit that like button, and I'll see you in the next one.